These days, there appears to be a blurring line between accurate information and fake news, misinformation, and also disinformation. This is why I am happy that at News Central TV, a Pan-African media, we have a program called The Proof. The Proof tries to sieve the chaff from the wheat of information. The program is in partnership with African Checks, the continent's leading facts-checking organization. The show is geared towards stopping and spreading misinformation and fake news. It is News Central's way of contributing to strengthen the civic space and ensuring our audience is well equipped to differentiate between the truth and lies. As I end this remark, I urge us as key stakeholders in the media to take seriously the watchdog role and to set the right agenda of nation building through the content we push. Make that child, make that Gen Z, make that millennial have a renewed hope for a nation polarized and troubled. With all of us working together, tomorrow is brighter. Thank you. On behalf of Tonye.
From the speech you heard from Miriam of the media, we're the fourth estate of the brand. We do a lot of public good. Our job is to inform and fact check and also educate people. So that's what we plan to do here at this session. It's nice to see Adeleru here. It's from Bloomberg. It's the only non-News Central person on this panel, but we hope to do justice to it. So without much ado, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Rubin, for putting this together, and everyone for being here. It's been a long day. So let's just start with the questions and get straight into it. So I'd like to start with Tolu on my right. All protocols observed as a gentleman. Start with you. I'm sure you don't mind. You're a feminist. Okay. So what's the role of traditional media outlets such as newspapers, television, in shaping the public understanding of political events and social events in a country like ours? I think we need to first begin because the topic is the role of media in a troubled nation. Would you define Nigeria as a troubled nation with or indices, and then you could respond to that question?
Good afternoon, everybody. So, by all indices, we are all here in Nigeria. We're here in Lagos. We live in Nigeria. We're Nigerians. There's no way we can doubt that Nigeria is facing troubled times. I don't think necessarily we want to call ourselves a troubled nation. It comes into our syntax and ownership of things, but we are a troubled country. We're a country that is polarized. We have millions more people who have moved into poverty in the past few years. We've come out of 2 recessions in less than 7 years as a UP. This is a country, the largest economy on the African continent, the most populous black nation in the world, that simply can't seem to get its act together. If that doesn't signify trouble, I don't know what else does. So we are a troubled country. We are a polarized country along ethnic, religious, regional lines. And those troubles can also even be seen on the front pages of national dailies. They can be heard when you listen to radio stations, especially talk stations. And they can be seen as well on TV in the type and context of the conversations that are being had about Nigeria and in Nigeria. So getting to the second question in terms of the role of the traditional media, it hasn't changed from what the role of the traditional media was when the traditional media came about many years ago. It hasn't changed, but what is changing is the audience, the tools available, the context in which the media is now operating. So at the base of it, the media is still necessary for us to inform, to engage, to educate. But now the changes are in what are we informing about? What are we engaging about? How are we doing it? Because there are new tools available to the media to make all of this possible. So I think our role has not changed as much as maybe a transformation completely, but yes, there are adaptations. We are like any other animal. We must adapt to the environment we find ourselves in. And it's, of course, Dawkins that said it's the strong that survive. The media is strong, so the media is also adapting. Not all the adaptations have been for the best, I will acknowledge that. especially when you bring in social media and how traditional media has tried to match up to what social media delivers. But in the long run, we are still at the very base of it, having to do what we were doing centuries ago when the traditional media came about, but we're adapting because circumstances and contexts have changed.
So I'll just pick up from there. Anthony, how do new forms of media such as social media and citizen journalism impact the flow of information? Are they complementary to the work of traditional media, or do you see them as a threat? Because when people say, citizen journalism, are you going to allow a citizen pilot to fly you on a plane, or a citizen doctor to treat you? They feel anybody can do journalism, especially with the proliferation of blogs. Lots of, especially the young generation, get their information from blogs, and they're not always accurate. So, what do you make of this?
It could be complementary, it could be distortionary, but it works both ways. The traditional media is riding heavily on social media to pass out information. But also, as you just mentioned, citizens are also taking advantage of it to pass out information. So if the information space has been democratized, and so everybody is out there passing out information. But then, at the end of the day, it makes even the traditional media more important, because the citizen media, they have no controls. So you just can't walk into a news central room and put anything online. There are clear editorial lines that you must follow. If I have a blog, I don't have those editorial lines. I just go there, I think this is right, and I put it online. And then it's consumed. Sadly, it has the same access that the traditional media has. So it's consumed by everybody. But the difference is that one has a check process to make sure that what goes out is right, while the other one just goes out without any check process in place. So there's a tendency for the citizen media or for the citizen-led media to misinform or to distort information because there's no checks and balances. There's no, as an editor, there's no gate to make sure that what you're putting out there is first of all questioned in-house before it gets to the public. For the traditional media, but then the advantage for the traditional media is that it becomes more important for you to be credible. You can't follow the citizen media to put out anything out there. Your credibility becomes your selling point. So that's where the traditional media becomes important. When people now realize that you are credible, they see it on the citizen media, but they don't do anything about it until they see it on your platform.
Uzonna is head of news at News Central Television. So this is an election year, and if you look at the candidates in Nigeria, the leading candidates, two of them own media stations, and one of them has a newspaper house too. So my question to you, Uzonna, is this. How do media ownership structures and economic interests influence the coverage of political events and social issues in this country? So, we're in the business of business. The media house is there to make money, but there are times where you have competing interests. Marketing tells you that you need to drop the story because it's about advertising. We also need to pay salary. So, at what point do you draw the line? And are you going to go for the public good and leave remuneration? Or are you going to report? And media ownership, to what extent does it hamper or help your job?
Good afternoon, everyone. The question you asked is a very delicate one because, like I said, we are in the business of business. The moment a media house fails to meet certain standards set by the ownership, then there's a big challenge in terms of retaining your job for those people that work there. The other side of it is that in many occasions, the staff themselves over-regulate themselves because you know that Mr. A has interest in this organization, so you now become a stooge and begin to take certain decisions that even the ownership will be embarrassed that you actually did it. And another, I'll just be throwing out things, and maybe at the end I'll try to come to a conclusion. Another aspect is that the politicians that set up media organizations from the beginning, some of them didn't set it up for profit. They set it up for a time like this. And so when that time comes, you that is the pious staff, the editor who knows the best of Nigerian law and the principles of journalism, will begin to dictate to him that he wouldn't use what he set up for a purpose to achieve that same purpose he set it up for. So you see how delicate the matter is. But primarily, a time comes when common sense reigns. I had a situation where we tried to paint a scenario for a certain owner of a media house and ask him, sir, do you think that if this media house continues to tell your story, which is obviously partisan, by the time election is conducted at whatever time and whatever year, whatever this your media house gives out to the public, will it be believed? Because there is already a mindset in the public that this media house will always tilt towards this direction. These are realities that we are facing right now. And so it will be quite difficult. However, all of this is working to the advantage of News Central. Because right now, News Central is not aligned to any political party. News Central is not doing the bidding of any political actor. In fact, we are open for everybody. And that's maybe because we are still free for now. I don't know how long that freedom will last. But right now that we are free, we are exploring it to the extreme as much as we can in ensuring that we serve the Nigerian people what they desire, objective journalism.
So let's talk about media regulation and in Nigerian freedom of the press. We have the FOI bill, I'm not sure so many stations have voted to get information. And last year, there was a Twitter ban. Twitter flagged the tweet of Nigeria's president, and the Minister of Information decided gave an instruction and said, so influencers for 7 or 8 months, you can only access Twitter in Nigeria via VPN. And it had widespread implications. So Tolu, what are the implications of government control and regulation of the media in the country, knowing that you cannot allow free for all and the government too has to play its role as a regulator? So where do you draw the line?
So it's a very delicate balance because you have, of course, you have defamation laws, you have standard laws. There's a legal framework for anyone to take a media organization to a court of law if they believe that they've been defamed or slandered. And a lot of media lawyers will tell you there's nothing else that's needed beyond that. But we see an overstep. We've seen an overstep continuously. It's not simply this administration, it's been a number of administrations in Nigeria. And if you follow the reports, the civic space in Nigeria has actually been shrinking. Freedom of the press in the country has also been shrinking. If you don't know Adeleru, go and look at his story. He was in jail for years because of what? Was refused access to his lawyers and his wife because of a story. I was at a consultative forum last week for media executives, and there's a young man, I believe, in Bauchi. He moves offices literally every week because of the stories that he's been putting out about the government as well as the region when it comes to destabilization and refugee crisis as well. He moves offices every single week. They're putting a plan in place so that if necessary, they can get this young man out of Nigeria within hours. Why? Because there is a threat to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. We can't ignore it. The numbers are there, the reports tell us the truth. So when it comes to regulation, simply I'm one of those who says government needs to act on. If there is laws for defamation and slander, activate the laws. And let's be honest, the people who go around and sidestep the most are politicians. They will pick up Facebook users, they will pick up bloggers, throw them in jail, and refuse to have them go to court, refuse to charge them. And these are young people, yes, they may be citizen journalists, but all it takes is a step from a citizen journalist to a journalist. And we've seen them do it with journalists. We've seen media houses shut down. We've seen media houses threatened as well. So it's a very long road, and this is a dinner that I don't think any media organization should be having with the government, because it's like trying to dine with the devil with a long spoon. It doesn't work. So the government needs to stay out of it. But then Anthony talks about credibility, and let's be honest, we've all been in the Nigerian media space for a long time. A lot of the Nigerian media, I would say, has lost credibility. So that's where the conversation space has opened up to even talk about media regulation. The Say No to Social Media bill was not simply about social media, it was also about the media. There's also another bill as well that's in front of I think it's gone past first reading in the National Assembly, that also has something to do with civil society spaces as well. And those are attempts to cripple and to crack down on the civic space, which works very closely hand in hand with the media. The media has to self-regulate, but self-regulation does not equal self-censorship. And so it behoves on us to ensure that we're training the journalists that come about, because he spoke about ethics. Citizen journalists don't have ethics. How many of them have seen the code of ethics for Nigerian journalists? I don't think any of them have even bothered to Google it. So they don't know that there are ethical standards to meet. But if the media itself, in the space we're in, does not do the work of training, upskilling, and regulating itself, not censoring itself, we will leave ourselves open to governments coming in with laws that in the long run do no favors for not just the media but also for the Nigerian public, because it's becoming much more difficult even as a Nigerian to speak out. So the media has to do its job in making sure it is upholding itself to the best and the highest standards, so we don't leave room for the government to come in any form of ramification.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Our focus so far has been on the media in Africa, but let's sweep things a bit. And I'm happy that we have a representative of a foreign news organization, a global news organization here in Anthony. He represents Bloomberg. We've often seen that our politicians in Nigeria, they have a penchant for talking to foreign media. I remember one of my colleagues was covering the events in Britain's Libya. And the people that were there were handing over the infected. They were at the airport to foreign media first. Oh, you're from BBC, CNN, take this. And then those of the indigenous journalists had to wait behind. But that's just one issue. One example. Our politicians, if you make a request for an interview, they'll rather talk to a BBC, Al Jazeera, France 24, RFI, and then talk to a Nigerian station. I don't know why. The other day, Nigerian news organizations have been organizing debates for so long, but all of them suddenly found a chance to go to Chatham House, and they were very happy to do that. This is no indictment of foreign media or anything, Anthony, but I also remember when the Chibok news broke, NTA was showing horses eating grass when the international media was already reporting that children are missing in Chibok. So you know the gravity of why people would rather go to international media for credibility and urgency. So Anthony, what is the impact of international media organizations on and foreign governments on the media landscape in a troubled nation?
How best to answer this question? But the truth also, I've been both in the local media and the international media. I was the former editor of Defense Day, so I've been on both ends. So I know, I would say from experience, I've seen that the international media has more resources. As you said, when we were covering, and they're a bit, because they have more resources, they're also a bit more independent in terms of their reporting. And then because they have more resources, the quality of the people they employ in most cases are very high. So they're able to do more. So they could easily fly me from here. I just returned from the US Africa Summit. I know how much it costs for my media house to fly me to US for that event. I didn't have to apply to any bank, any local bank, to sponsor me to US Africa event. We know how the local media operates here. If I were to go for that same event as a local media person, most likely my media house would have expected an outsider to help me move to take that trip. But hey, I got almost, as an international media person, I have a card where I spend money on and I get refunds for. So it gives you more flexibility. I could just get a permission and I'll fly to Maiduguri overnight and do a story without constraint, this financial constraint. So that's the flexibility the international media brings to the space. And as I said, one thing I also noticed, maybe because they have the money to employ better qualified journalists, I've noticed sometimes you see an international media person interviews your finance minister. He comes out with an exclusive story that is run in all the local media. And sometimes that's what creates the impression that they love talking to the local media. Because if Bloomberg reports something and it runs through all the local media, it's not as if the local media have not, they've not interviewed this thing. But what I've come to realize is sometimes the local media does the same interviews, and either they are afraid to ask the hard questions, or they are not knowledgeable enough to ask the hard questions, to interrogate the hard questions. So because before I go and interview the finance minister, I know my story. You understand? So I go there knowing the story I want, and go there asking the questions that will give me that story. The local media sometimes go there with an open mind, and the finance minister is able to dictate the direction of what. So she ends up giving them the story what the government wants to tell, and nobody cares about that story. So we need to upskill. Sadly, we need to have more resources. I don't know how we'll do that, because it's also a factor of the economy. The international media has access to companies that run trillions of naira budgets, trillions of dollars budgets. If you put some petty cash, I report of Bloomberg, and sometimes the stories we do, we tell some Nigerian companies that we can't report to because your whole balance sheet is the petty cash of some of our investors. So it makes a lot of difference if we have access to that level of financing. It's difficult for the local media to have that same access. So you don't blame them, but it also, that's where I've always advocated that for a country or for even the continent, you can't afford to ignore your media space. Because if you don't, apart from few organizations that are allowing local journalists to get into the media space, the international media space, because I know my presence in Bloomberg sometimes shapes the way they report on Nigeria. It would be the same thing if it was a foreigner managing that same space, because I'm able to say, okay, no, you don't present it this way. You understand? But but then at the end of the day, you want your local government, I'm not saying government intervention, but they must pay attention to the strengths of the local media. Because if you don't tell your story, other people will tell it.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and thanks for fighting the good fight for us. At News Central, we never report any country as a impoverished African nation, war-torn African country. We're very conscious that these words have meanings. In America last week, there was a mass shooting. We don't go and say the country where there's mass shooting races in America before we start our story. So, two wrongs don't make a right. We're very proper. So, Uzonna, before I come to you, just a background to my next question. The media is very powerful. I remember a few years ago, it was Wazobia Kano that did a story of immunization, and it led to the death of inoculators, health workers in Kano, just to show you how powerful it is and how sensitive. And we all know the story of radio, television, lead radio called RTLM in Rwanda in 1994. It added to the flames of the genocide it was adding petrol to an already terrible situation. So my last question to you, Uzonna, is this. To what extent does the media in a country contribute to the maintenance of stability or escalation of conflict? And as head of news, what ethical considerations are important for journalists reporting on sensitive issues in a
huge influence in either maintaining stability or creating a worse situation? You made reference, Gbenga, to the Rwanda case. A few years ago in Nigeria here, there was a clash at mile 12 between traders there, and someone was killed. The first media house that broadcast the story captioned it "Clash between Yoruba and Hausa traders," and went ahead to say that an Hausa man was killed in mile 12. Few minutes after, there was another clash towards Ojo axis where 2 Yoruba boys were killed. And that was an irresponsible presentation of whatever the situation was. Because the media operators, first of all, are part of the system and part of the society. And we should and are always responsible to ensure that no matter what it is, that is why sometimes a story could be very scary, and there will be a deliberate attempt to downplay the story without necessarily misinforming the public. But you wouldn't throw in all the venom that may come with what the situation is into the kind of story you are publishing or you are pushing out, so that you would give room and still allow a space for managing whatever the situation that is going on at that time. So by and large, the media has a huge responsibility, particularly in a political period like we are going through in Nigeria now, in managing information and presenting the story in a manner that it will not infuriate or escalate whatever that is a bit of a tense situation. The other aspect of your question, Gbenga, about what the journalists themselves should know about what they are doing, particularly covering stories in a I wanted to disagree with Nigeria being referred to as a troubled nation. Yeah, because we may be going through trouble, but not a troubled nation. But let's leave that. Me and some people will fight later. So Nigeria is actually going through a hard time, but when we look at the indices around us, even in Africa, on the continent of Africa, Nigeria is not in the worst case. So but let's leave that aside. But for journalists covering stories in Nigeria, first is that every journalist must be sensitive. You are a lifesaver and not a killer. So whatever you're going to do that will put the life of people in danger, think about it very well. And if you are in doubt, consult. Consult the next level of authority within the organization where you work, so that you'll be sure that you do not escalate any bad situation. Again, it is not your duty as a journalist to gossip. So when it is not factual, you better leave it.
Do better, and the partnership and the collaboration will be deepened. We also like to say a big thank you to News Central Thank you so very much for your presence and for all your support. We would also like to have a deeper collaboration and partnership with you in so many of our events that we would like to do this year and in the years ahead. Thank you so very much. For the team that is here and those that are back in the office, ensuring that things go well. We would also like to recognize and also appreciate the support of the Mayor of Housing. Mayor of Housing, we appreciate you. Thank you so very much, and the organization for the support. Your support has gone a long way in making this event a success. Appreciation and recognition also go to American Management University. If you're here, we appreciate the partnership, we appreciate the support that you have given, and we say a very big thank you to you. We would also like to thank Business Day newspaper. Thank you so very much as well. There were some of them that were here early at the start of the summit. And a very big thank you also to African Economic Summit Group, that is also a supporter of this event. Let me also bring to the knowledge of the House that the Africa Economic Summit Group will be hosting the 2023 Africa Economic Summit in Accra, Ghana in April 26th to 27th of this year. We would like to invite all of you and your organizations, and will encourage as many of you that will want to go with us on this journey. You are welcome, you're invited. Our door is open for collaboration and for partnership at the levels that you will be willing to do or engage with on this journey. I know that our time is fast spent. Please, as you journey, drive safely, and we pray that our God will take us home safely in the mighty name of Jesus. Lunch itself, well, it could mean dinner for some people, but we call it lunch. So lunch is served. And we hope to see you again. Maybe next year, if we hold in Abuja, maybe next year we'll hold in Rivers or Cross River. We never know. But we do hope that we will see you again. Thank you so very much.